It began with a fire on a cold December night in Austin. When firefighters stepped inside the small yogurt shop, they didn't just find a burning building. They walked into a slaughterhouse. 4 teenage girls, bound, gagged, and stacked upon one another. For 34 years, this crime tore the city apart. Innocent men were caged, coerced into confessing to a nightmare they didn't commit. Meanwhile, the real monster was a ghost, hiding in the shadows of cold case files. Until now. Austin, Texas, 1991. The shop on West Anderson Lane had a whimsical name. I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. It was a small, popular hangout for local teenagers, a slice of innocent Americana. Inside, 17-year-old high school senior Jennifer Harbison was working alongside her close friend Eliza Thomas. Jennifer was the picture of a bright future, an athlete, a dancer, and a responsible daughter who had just been gifted a deep blue Chevrolet pickup truck. She had promised her parents she would use it to drive her younger sister to school. On the night of Friday, December 6th, Jennifer and Eliza were closing up shop. They weren't alone. Jennifer's 15-year-old sister, Sarah, and Sarah's 13-year-old friend, Amy Ayers, had dropped by to wait for them to finish so they could all drive home together. But that drive home never happened. Just before midnight, a patrol officer noticed smoke billowing from the storefront. Firefighters arrived to battle a blaze that was unusually intense, requiring massive amounts of water to suppress. When the smoke finally cleared and they moved into the back of the scorched building, expecting perhaps only property damage, they froze in horror. In the rear storage room, lying amidst the debris, were 4 charred bodies. The brutality of the scene was overwhelming. The girls, Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy, had been stripped naked, bound with their own undergarments, and gagged. They had been executed, shot in the back of the head with a .22 caliber pistol. 3 of the girls were stacked on top of one another, their bodies burned almost charcoal. The killers had gathered paper plates and cups, dousing them and the girls in lighter fluid to ignite a fire directly on the victims, a desperate attempt to incinerate the evidence of their cruelty. 13-year-old Amy Ayers was found slightly apart from the others. Although she had suffered severe burns, her body told a harrowing story of survival and suffering. Like the others, she was bound and shot, but the first bullet had deflected off her skull. The killer, realizing she was still alive, shot her again with a second gun, a .380 caliber pistol. The investigation was immediately compromised. The intense heat had melted an aluminum ladder in the storage room, and the thousands of gallons of water used to fight the fire had turned the crime scene into a swamp, washing away crucial forensic traces. Austin detectives were left with 4 bodies, a melted crime scene, and a city demanding answers. Panic gripped Austin. White ribbons were tied to trees across the city as a symbol of mourning, and a massive cash reward was displayed on television to solicit tips. The pressure on the Austin Police Department was crushing. 8 days after the murders, a 16-year-old named Maurice Pierce was detained at a mall for carrying a gun. It was a .22 caliber, the same caliber used in the murders, but ballistics tests were inconclusive. Lacking solid evidence, police released Pierce and his 3 friends, Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, and Forrest Wellborn. The trail went cold for 8 years. But in 1999, a new cold case unit decided to look back at these 4 young men. They brought them in for interrogation. By now, they were in their mid-20s. What followed was a masterclass in psychological coercion. Detectives interrogated Michael Scott for days. Reports later surfaced that officers screamed at him for hours and allegedly pointed a gun at his head, shouting at him to confess. Broken and exhausted, Scott eventually broke, weaving a narrative that matched the police's theory perfectly. He claimed they planned a robbery that spiraled into rape and murder. When Robert Springsteen was told his friend had turned on him, he too was subjected to hours of aggressive interrogation. Eventually, he also broke down, admitting to the crime. There was just one massive problem. The science didn't fit. In 2008, highly sensitive DNA testing on the victims revealed a male genetic profile that did not match any of the four suspects. Prosecutors, desperate to close the book on the city's most infamous crime, chose to ignore this biological fact. They argued the sample was likely contamination and proceeded to trial relying solely on the coerced confessions. The jury believed the story over the science. Michael Scott was sentenced to life. Robert Springsteen was sentenced to death. It wasn't until 2009, after a Supreme Court ruling regarding the right to confront witnesses, that their convictions were overturned. The charges were eventually dismissed, but the damage was done. They had lost a decade of their lives, branded as child killers by their community, while the police insisted they were guilty but got off on a technicality. The true killer was still out there, and he had been invisible to them the entire time. Decades passed. The yogurt shop murders remained an open wound for the families and the city. It wasn't until 2022 that a new detective, Daniel Jackson, took a fresh look at the physical evidence with modern eyes. He turned his attention to a single .380 caliber shell casing found at the scene, the bullet that had ended Amy Ayer's life. For the first time, this casing was run through NIBIN, the National Ballistics Database. The result was a shock. The gun matched an unsolved murder in Kentucky from 1998. Armed with this connection, investigators revisited the unknown male DNA profile found on the girls. They ran a nationwide search on the YSTR database. This time, they got a hit. The DNA belonged to a man named Robert Eugene Brashers. Brashers was a career criminal and a serial killer who had drifted across states, leaving a trail of violence. His record was terrifying. In 1985, he had shot a woman in Florida who miraculously survived. In 1998, he murdered a mother and her 12-year-old daughter in Missouri. He fit the profile perfectly. He targeted women, used restraints, and carried a .380 pistol. In fact, investigation revealed that the day after the yogurt shop murders in 1991, Brashers had been stopped at a border checkpoint near Austin. He was driving a stolen car and carrying the very gun used to kill Amy Ayers. Why hadn't he been caught? Because Robert Brashers had killed himself in a police standoff in 1999. Ironically, the same year the 4 innocent boys were being coerced into false confessions. He had taken his secrets to the grave. But science speaks for the dead. To be absolutely certain, police tested the DNA found under 13-year-old Amy Ayers' fingernails. It was a perfect match to Brashers. In her final moments, Amy had fought her attacker, scratching him and capturing his identity under her nails, holding on to the truth for 34 years. In September 2025, Austin police finally announced the case was solved. The 4 men who had their lives stolen were officially vindicated. The families of Jennifer, Eliza, Sarah, and Amy finally knew the face of the monster who took their daughters. It was a victory for truth, but a tragic reminder of a justice system that, in its haste to close a case, almost destroyed the wrong lives while the real devil slipped away.